intelligent to be revolutionary. It's intelligent to be revolutionary. Thank you, sisters and brothers. He lives in the spirit of this tremendous movement against police violence that we have seen over the past 4 or 5 months, sparked by the brutal murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and then of Eric Garner in Staten Island. The police kill people all the time, black and brown and young people. Seems to be open season on black and brown young people, and some people who are not necessarily so young. But this time people said no more. And they rebelled in Ferguson, even in the face of high-tech weaponry, tanks, armored personnel carriers. And ultimately people began rising up all over the country, especially in New York, shutting down highways, shutting down bridges, shutting down subways, going out night after night. And the watchword of the day was shut it down, because we're tired, because Black Lives Matter, because we can't breathe, because hands up, don't shoot. That movement is still alive, even though the chill of winter may have seen it ebb a little bit. And we know how the system had used the killing of 2 cops a few months ago as a weapon to beat down the movement, as if we're responsible for that. We are not. But in spite of these challenges, in spite of the challenges that face us, the Black Lives Matter movement is alive and well. And we are here today on the 50th anniversary of Malcolm X's assassination to say the struggle will continue. And as a matter of fact, some of us are in the early stages of organizing a tribunal, a people's tribunal, against police violence and structural racism. The first session of that tribunal will be here in Harlem at the National Black Theater on April 2nd. But that'll just be the opening session. There'll be more sessions, and they'll be all over the country, where we will take testimony from those who have been victimized by the police, from the survivors of those who have been killed by the police, and we will make a record. But it'll be more than testimony. It'll be more than testimony. We'll also put the whole police department on trial. We'll talk about the real reasons why the police really exist, because we know it has very little to do with protecting individuals and more to do with protecting property and the rich and landlords and bosses and the haves against the have-nots. We have a flyer this afternoon that we will give you, and you can find out more information about this in our first session on April 2nd. So I just want to end my few words by doing a mic check. Mic check. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Long live.
Long live.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Long live.
Long live.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Long live.
Long live.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Long live.
Long live.
He lives.
He lives
Through us.
Through us.
He lives.
He lives.
Through the struggle
Through the struggle
of all oppressed people.
of all oppressed people.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives.
Through the struggle
Through the struggle
of all oppressed people.
of all oppressed people.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives.
Through the struggle
Through the struggle
of all oppressed people.
of all oppressed people
Everywhere.
everywhere.
In Harlem.
In Harlem,
In Ferguson.
in Ferguson,
On Staten Island.
on Staten Island,
In Palestine.
in Palestine,
In Gaza.
in Gaza,
Throughout Africa.
throughout Africa,
Throughout Latin America.
throughout Latin America,
Throughout Asia.
throughout Asia,
In every ghetto.
in every ghetto,
In every poor community.
in every poor community,
In every tenement.
in every tenement,
In every prison.
in every prison.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives
Through the struggle
through the struggle
of oppressed people.
of oppressed people
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Malcolm lives.
Malcolm lives
Through the struggle
through the struggle
of oppressed people.
of oppressed people
Everywhere.
everywhere.
He taught us.
He taught us.
He taught us
He taught us
that to be revolutionary
that to be revolutionary
is only intelligent.
is only intelligent.
That to be revolutionary
That to be
revolutionary
is intelligent.
is intelligent.
That to be revolutionary
That to be revolutionary
is intelligent.
is intelligent.
Long live
long live.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Yeah.
I just want to say Black Lives Matter. His life matters. All of our lives matter. I want to say Uhuru, because Uhuru means freedom. And one thing Malcolm X said is, unless you're ready to die for it, take freedom out of your vocabulary. And as Ossie Davis said at his funeral, Malcolm X was our prince, our black shining prince, who didn't hesitate to die because he loved us so. And I just want us to just kind of remember those words and those things that, you know, when people are really willing to die for what they believe in. And that's true. And I think Malcolm X represented that. And he represented that unbridled, that unadulterated, that unfiltered truth that so many of our so-called leaders lack today. On these streets, right at this corner, he spoke. And he spoke the truth. He said things about police brutality. He asked questions such as, how can you have such a high crime rate, yet such a heavy police presence in the community at the same time? He talked about them being in cahoots, because Malcolm X was a part of these streets, and he was a hustler. He was a drug dealer. He was a thief. He was a criminal at one point. And then he evolved into something much more. Thanks to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but even before then from his father, learning from the Honorable Marcus Garvey. And we're out here today to give homage, because Malcolm X was killed 50 years ago today. On May 19th of this year, he would have been 90 years old. And we want people walking by to please take a flyer. Please come on out and march with us today. We're going to go to the 28th precinct on 123rd Street, which is one of the precincts that Malcolm X did a demonstration after a brother was killed, injured here in Harlem. And we want people to just remember that. We're out here today. Malcolm X was killed 50 years ago today. Everybody turn around looking while we got these signs. Yes, he was killed 50 years ago today. And on May 19th, he would have been 90 years old. So we're out here paying respect to Brother Malcolm, who I believe all of us respect. And so we just want to give homage to that. I just also wanted to say, after our march, we're going to be going down to the International Action Center at 24th Street, 147 24th Street on the second floor, where we're going to have a forum, a dinner, and a discussion. So people come down to that. And also, at 9 o'clock, we're going to do a vigil. We won't be out there too long because it's so cold. But we're going to be in front of the Audubon Ball Room where he was killed 50 years ago at 9 o'clock to do a candlelight or a camera-light vigil, whatever you have in terms of that. So again, for everybody walking by today, right now, we're giving homage to Malcolm X, who was killed 50 years ago. Today, Good to see Captain Lewis here. We definitely have to let him say a few words. Brother has been standing up against police brutality and misconduct and malfeasance for a long time. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want people to remember Malcolm X today. He was killed 50 years ago today, and he was definitely an example of our manhood, as Ossie Davis said at his funeral. And he was an internationalist, and he spoke against all kind of human rights violation and abuses that we talk about today in the Black Lives Matter movement. I just want to say I love you, Brother Malcolm, for all that you did and all that you continue to do and all that you continue to inspire. Without you, there would be no us. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Actually, one of the biggest demonstrations against police brutality, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people. And the first demonstration of its kind, organized by the Nation of Islam under Malcolm. They weren't into organizing demonstrations. They had another agenda. But this time, under the leadership of Malcolm, they organized a protest. It was one afternoon in the April of 1957. And some of the members of the nation were out selling Muhammad Sphinx on this corner. And they saw the police beating up a brother. And a young man by the name of Johnston X. Hinton, I believe that was his name, Johnston X. Hinton, said to the police, "This ain't Alabama." At which point, the police turned their backs and their sticks on him. Damn near beat him to death. Cracked his skull. And then took him to the 128th precinct on 123rd Street. And what was then 8th Avenue, now it's Frederick Douglass Boulevard. Malcolm went there with a small delegation. They asked to see Brother Hinton. They were refused. They asked information about Brother Hinton. The police would tell them nothing. And after they were frustrated for a few minutes, they decided that we had to go to the next level. And they returned a few hours later. But this time, they had not hundreds, but thousands of militant members of the Nation of Islam with them. And this is today, until today, one of the biggest demonstrations and most famous demonstrations against police brutality. What we hope to do a little later on this day where we remember Malcolm, is to march over to the 128th precinct, just a few blocks from here.
I'm now Malcolm X. I may be one of the few people here who was out here during that time, and I was privileged to see Malcolm X speaking many times, right on this corner. There was a famous bookstore here, owned by a man by the name of Louis Show. It was called the House of Common Sense.
And proper propaganda.
And proper propaganda. But Malcolm was uncompromised in his stand against, oppression that would attract me to him. The first time I met Malcolm physically was actually in Virginia, not New York City. In Richmond, Virginia, around 1959. Stayed with him for some years, and I was there. I happened to be at the meeting that caused him to get suspended from the Nation of Islam at Manhattan Center, which that building is still there. That's right up the street from the present-day Madison Square Garden. So it always brings back a lot of memories. When I attended the Adjunct Fed, around Malcolm, having met him, having interaction with him. And I think the last time I spoke with him physically was at the Muslim Bazaar in 169th Armory. I remember I was asking him about, I was complaining about some of these sorry politicians. He said, "Brother, don't look at the puppet, look at the puppeteer." know who's controlling these politicians. But very down to earth brother, very philosophical and a very deep thinker. But this is as much as I'll say for now because you know it's cold out here and I don't want to hold us up. But I had to just share some reflections on being able to react with Malcolm X person. Another brother who most of y'all know who passed away recently was out here during that time was the Lumbay Brat. How many of y'all remember Lumbay Brat? That's when I met a Lumbay, was during that period. He was with a group called the African National Pioneer Movement. So a lot of Americans come back. When Fidel Castro came to New York, he stayed right in that building across the street, the Teresa Hotel. When they was giving him a lot of nonsense downtown, it was Malcolm and a Lumbay. People mention Malcolm, but they don't mention the Lumbay Brat. It was Malcolm and the Lumbay Brat who intervened and made it possible for Fidel Castro and his entourage to come on up to Harlem, where he was welcomed at. They stay right there, right across the street at the Teresa Hotel. I don't know what it is now. But this is as much as I'll say for now. Long live Malcolm X.
Long live Malcolm X.
My name is Ray Lewis. I'm a retired Philadelphia captain. I got involved in activism 3 years ago at Occupy. When Occupy came in, I realized everything they were saying was true. Years ago when I was young, I read about Malcolm X. I always wanted to read other than what I was being taught in school because I really believed I was not getting the truth. And in reading Malcolm X's book and another book, Black Like Me, by James Griffin, I believe his name was, he dyed his skin black or dark. And he went around living, he was a white man, but he went around living as a black man. And he recorded the way he was treated as a black man. And that was an eye-opener. Black Like Me, the book, still available, I'd imagine. Now, two quick experiences that shocked the hell out of me when I was young. Traveling down south with my family, I was about 15 years old. We stopped at a Lincoln Hotel in Marion, Virginia. We're facing the clerk, and we're checking in. He gives my father the keys, and I go down to pick up my suitcase, and he says, no, the boy will get your bags. So I turn around. This was no boy. This was a 50-year-old man, about 6'5", 280 pounds. And that clerk called him boy. I just couldn't imagine it. So anyway, after we go up to our room, and we're all settled, we want to go out to eat. So where do we eat? We eat across the diner, across the hotel. And who comes in but a minor league baseball team with 7 white guys and 1 black guy. The diner is in full motion. It's about 6:30, dinner time. They all sit down at a table. A waitress comes over and very naturally tells the black man, excuse me, but we're closed. Doesn't say that to any of the white men, the ball players. Now here's what also got me. That black man, he knew the deal. He didn't squawk, he didn't shout racism, he didn't shout, why are you serving white people? He obediently just got up, and with the saddest look on his face, a look of being beaten his whole life, he got up and walked out. Now my mother saw that, and my mother told my father, did you see that? I'm telling the manager. And as soon as she got up, my father, being more worldly, grabbed her, pulled her down, and said, you can't. If you tell the manager, they're going to go over, they'll know we're outsiders. They'll go over, and we're going to wake up the next morning with 4 flat tires and 4 broken windshields, because they know we're staying over there. And so we couldn't even do anything. My father, he wasn't prejudiced, but he did not want to end up with a car damaged like that. And I'll never forget that black man's face as he got up from the table. He was so defeated. He faced this his whole life. And so I've always been aware. Oh, and then another thing. One of the best bosses I had was a black man in Philadelphia named James Randolph. This was before I was a police officer. And he took a liking to me. And I'll never forget, one day he put his hand over my shoulder and he goes, Ray, there's not one day that in some way, shape, or form, I don't know I'm black. I never thought, hey, I'm white today, or this happened and it makes me know I'm white. I never thought of that. But he said every single day something happens. He sees a sign, he sees an advertisement, he hears somebody say something, he sees the way he looks at somebody looks at him when he walks into a store. Every day he walks, he feels black. There's no way any white person can relate to being black, but we can try to empathize as much as possible, and if you do that, you gotta support this movement. Thank you.
Right on, brother. Yes, thank you.
I can hear my brother crying, I can't breathe. Now I'm in the struggle and I just can't leave. Calling out the violence of the racist police. We ain't gonna stop till people are free. We ain't gonna stop till people are free.
All right.
Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies. Everybody is here. Recently, when I was blessed to make a trip or pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, where I met many people from all over the world, plus spent many weeks in Africa, trying to broaden my own scope and get more of an open mind to look at the problem as it actually is. One of the things that I realized, and I realized this even before going over there, was that our African brothers have gained their independence faster than you and I here in America have. They've also gained recognition and respect as human beings much faster than you and I. Just 10 years ago on the African continent, our people were colonized. They were suffering all forms of colonization, oppression, exploitation, degradation, humiliation, discrimination, and every other kind of Asian. And in a short time, they have gained more independence, more recognition, more respect as human beings than you and I have. And you and I live in a country which is supposed to be the citadel of education, freedom, justice, democracy, and all of those other pretty sounding words. So it was our intention to try and find out what was our African brothers doing to get results, so that you and I could study what they had done and perhaps gain from that study or benefit from their experiences. And my traveling over there was designed to help to find out how. One of the first things that the independent African nations did was to form an organization called the Organization of African Unity. The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective: to fight whoever gets in our way. To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere, and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
I am very honored to welcome you all to our party's Black History Month, or Black Liberation Month, for honoring the great revolutionary Malcolm X on the anniversary of his assassination 50 years ago at the Audubon Ball Room in Harlem. I should also take note that May 19th will be the 90th anniversary of Malcolm's birth. So I'm sure we're going to be continuing our, commemoration of him at that time and hopefully throughout the year. All over the country and all over the world, Malcolm's legacy is being examined and commemorated with forums like this one. And thank you for coming out. It's a really terrible day, but this is a great turnout, so thank you for coming out. And the demonstrations that took place, are taking place, have taken place, like right here in Harlem, just a few hours ago that was organized by the People's Power Assembly, Occu-Evolve, and there's other commemorations happening in Brooklyn, and tonight at the Schomburg Library, and of course throughout the country. Our sisters and brothers in Ferguson and St. Louis, of course we all know that's that's been really the origins of the Black Lives Matter movement in this country, beginning with the murder of Michael Brown. They have called for a national day of actions today in honor of Malcolm X and throughout Black Liberation Month. Malcolm never compromised his militancy when it came to fighting for the liberation of all oppressed people, especially those of African descent, no matter where they lived. Malcolm's worldwide perspective was evolving into an anti-capitalist one. Before he was tragically cut down by government assassins' bullets at the young age of 39, he was sowing the seeds for the formation, as we just heard, for the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which was based on the formation of the Organization of African Unity. And the main objective for the AAOU was to build a strong united front in the Western Hemisphere, regardless of ideology, to fight for national liberation. His speech in Selma, Alabama, just a few weeks before, quote, Bloody Sunday, when hundreds of black people were viciously attacked on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, again called for such unity, including with the massive civil rights movement led by Dr. King. A significant fact that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is, I don't think, really known. I think most people know what the counterintelligence program was and is today, still going on, more known as COINTELPRO by the FBI. This was a terrorist program that targeted the Black Panther Party, the American Indian movement, the Young Lords, and even the civil rights movements, especially in the 60s and 70s. They actually started a file on Malcolm X as far back as 1953. 1953. This is when he was just, coming into the Nation of Islam. He was actually in prison. But what they did, they found a communique from Malcolm when he was in prison saying, this is a quote, "I was always a communist." I thought it was very insightful. This is part of the Malcolm X, the FBI Files book. And two of my favorite Malcolm X quotes that really reflected his connecting the anti-imperialist struggles to the oppressive capitalist system. This was one that was made after he came back from Mecca in 1964. It says, "The same man that was colonizing our people in Kenya was colonizing our people in Congo. The same one in the Congo was colonizing our people in South Africa and in southern Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe today, and in Burma and in India and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. They realized all over the world where the dark man was being oppressed. He was being oppressed by the white man. Where the dark man was being exploited, he was being exploited by the white man." Now, that's end quote. And then this is a quote that was made, part of a speech that he was made a week before he was assassinated. This is, quote, "It is incorrect to classify the revolt of the Negro as simply a racial conflict of black against white, or as a purely American problem. Rather, we are seeing today a global rebellion of the oppressed against the oppressor, the exploited against the exploiter." So even if Malcolm X had not evolved into the internationalist that he was moving towards before he was cut down, his contributions as an uncompromising revolutionary black nationalist who preached the right to self-defense would and should still be commemorated and honored by revolutionaries everywhere. I just found out that just recently in Beirut, Lebanon, there was a conference in honor of Malcolm X. And the forum we are holding today will not only be looking back at the life and legacy of Brother Malcolm, but more importantly, how his legacy lives on today in the current struggles and movements here and worldwide. Malcolm stood for the workers as well. He stood with the Black and Puerto Rican hospital workers back in 1964 with A. Philip Randolph, another prominent Black labor leader. And especially today with the Black Lives Matter movement. And we want to have this afternoon an in-depth discussion and dialogue, probing dialogue on Malcolm X's legacy today, but also looking back at his life. And the people that you're seeing up here will be giving some opening comments to help lay the basis for that dialogue. And I'm really, really honored that we have with us 4 young leaders of the movement today. This is Simone from East Flatbush Cop Watch, Simone Gamble. We have Alexia Philpo, who's a Hunter student, who's also a leader of the People's Power Assembly. We have Colin Ashley, who's a graduate student with CUNY. He's also a leader of the People's Power Assembly. We have Ramiro Funes, who is a leader of Fight Imperialism Stand Together Youth Group, and also a leader of the Honduras USA, Resistencia USA, and Larry Holmes, who is the first Secretary of Workers World Party, and also a leader of the People's Power Assembly. And we're also going to have other planned comments, after the panel up here do their opening presentations. So first of all, we're going to hear from Larry Holmes.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers, and I'm glad that you decided to come even though it's snowing and cold and everything else. The weather has affected many of the demonstrations and events, but I'm pleased to say that they have not stopped. And actually, this meeting is looking pretty good. As Monica suggested, our charge here is not to make big speeches yet, but to, just start some ideas to start a discussion, and I'll try to do that. It's no surprise that because of this rebellion against the police that's been taking place in this country, and I don't need to go over that. Everyone here is well aware of it and has been in it. It is the context for this commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. All the programs for Malcolm X today, to one extent or another, are talking about the Black Lives Movement. Pieces that are being written, even a piece by one of Malcolm's daughter, an op-ed in the New York Times, some of which is very good, some of which is, well, the part, let's focus on the part that's good. And that's the case for our meeting. One can only wonder what Malcolm would have thought of the Black Lives Movement, and had he been able to live this long, and 50 years is a long time, and witness the ups and downs, no doubt he would have been pleased after what seems like a long desert or valley or whatever, metaphor you want to use, of relative inactivity. All of a sudden, there is this tremendous rebellion bringing tens of thousands of people out on the street, not only in Ferguson and New York, but everywhere. I believe he would have been pleased by the militancy, by the leadership of the youth. I think he would have been pleased by the role that women are playing, black women, which is a different role than they played in the past, where all too often they were kept behind. This time, black women were up front. I would like to think, although one can only speculate about this, and we have to remember that, Brother Malcolm was brought up in a time not only socially and culturally, but even in the progressive movement, politically progressive movement. The LGBTQ movement was still, it wasn't there yet. But had he been able to evolve politically, and actually that was one of the most important things about Malcolm. One of the things that made him a revolutionary was that he was constantly evolving. But he was evolving in a certain direction, a revolutionary direction. That he would have been pleased by this time that the LGBTQ movement is also playing a distinctive role in this rebellion. A lot could be said on that alone. It's interesting that, and there were movements around C.C. McDonald. Y'all remember, C.C. McDonald and Melissa Alexander, who was finally out of prison. These are two women who were victims of the racist system, and there were movements, good movements, but there wasn't the response, of course, an equal response to, the murder of Mike Brown and Errol Garner and others, and, we keep reminding people about this because, can't leave the sisters behind. Have to put them up front, but it wasn't the sisters who sparked this rebellion, at least the victimization. It was two men, but yet women and LGBT, lesbians and gay and bi and trans people played such a significant role. It says a lot about how far the movement has come. Today, the Black Life Matters movement is in a crisis. And I don't say that as a bad thing, because a movement inevitably goes through a crisis in order to reach the next phase. The demonstrations are not as large as they were months ago. Don't be too concerned, it may be temporary. The weather's been bad. There's a natural ebbing, the tide comes in and then it goes back out and it comes in again. We've seen the murder of these two cops in Brooklyn used by the police and the bourgeoisie as a weapon to beat the movement down and kind of restrain it and put it on the defensive. It's hard to gauge what kind of impact that's had, but let's all assume that it's had some impact somewhere along with the weather and these other things. And also there are differences that are emerging in the movement, differences over direction, which is an inevitable and healthy thing. What should we do? What's the most important thing to do? That's one thing. But within these differences, there's something else that's discernible. It's not complicated. You can see it, and it needs to be called out. And that's a split between the militants who want to keep the struggle, whatever the program is, whatever the demands are, they want to keep it in the street, and they want to keep shutting stuff down, and those moderates who want to pull the militants back in and say, well, you've done that, now focus on something concrete. And they seem very rational, and, like they're giving you the benefit of their experience. Well, what kind of changes do you want? Should we hire more police, more black police chiefs, have cameras, reform the grand jury system? Let's be concrete now and stop shutting down highways, And we've heard this before, And what the militants are saying is that, listen, we wouldn't even be talking about this if we didn't shut down stuff. So we know what draws a reaction from the enemy, and don't tell us that we shouldn't be doing that. And in many ways, this is a replay of the role that Malcolm X played 50 years ago. He was the spokesperson, the leader of the militant wing of the Black Liberation Movement. There was no equal in his time. And all that came after him were inspired by him. his program, he just said it, by any means necessary. Whether he was joking or not, he talked about forming an army for the Black Liberation Movement. His counterpart, in terms of the moderates, is generally considered to be Martin Luther King. It's a little unfair because Martin Luther King was more complicated than that, and actually in some ways was more of a centrist who could get pressure from both sides. He was a pacifist. He certainly wasn't going to be for self-defense. He was for turning the other cheek. And we know the social forces that were supporting him and where they wanted him to go. But I think even the militants, almost 99% of them at this point, you know, in hindsight, sort of hold Martin Luther King in a special, unique position.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Shut it down. We have 50 years since the assassination of one of the greatest human beings in America. And I'm sorry to say, I wasn't around 50 years ago, but I don't think much has changed. 50 years ago, we know there was hoses and dogs and straight up brutality. Public brutality. Unfortunately today, this type of brutality is more subtle. It's sinister. And it seeps its way into our education system as well. Larry spoke of truth. Let's talk some truth right now. There are more police in our public schools, in our community centers, in our public housing, in Lexington Avenue holding machine guns, than I care to see.
So I'm honored to be on this panel, and I'm glad to be celebrating Malcolm X. His ideology and his legacy is the reason for what I do and how I live. Although I'm not happy to be celebrating his assassination, I do appreciate the fact that we take this tragedy that was supposed to kill the movement and use it to community build and make what this resistance is something that's a movement and not just a moment. So I really appreciate that. So what I do is Cop Watch. I'm on the East Stafford Cop Watch. We have teams all around the city. If you're interested in joining, please talk to myself or James. At the root of it, Cop Watch is a community self-defense tactic. It's a practice of monitoring and documenting the police. So when we walk the streets, we film the police and make sure the person being stopped is not abused, and it helps to de-escalate the situation. I think at the root of it is community love and respect and solidarity. It's community love, respect, and solidarity. I think just like Malcolm, Cop Watch has a bad name, and we kind of have to deconstruct it too. I think whenever people of color try to protect themselves, it's seen as a threat against the state and violent, and that is not something that we're putting forth.
Every 28 hours around America, an African-American male, woman, or child is killed by law enforcement with the use of a gun. Mind you, they have much more less lethal weapons and still kill us unjustly, labeling their heinous crimes as no harm done. Only 3% of killer cops ever face jail time. Their alibi is that the person that they murdered unjustly was committing a crime. So if that's the case, the sleeping 7-year-old Ayanna Jones, the casual shopper John Crawford, the playing 12-year-old Tamir Rice, and the man walking down a set of stairs, Akai Gurley, should all be doing time? Innocent lives being taken by those who swear an oath to protect, not kill unjustly with no remorse and then be labeled as correct. A badge does not make you immune to jurisdiction. If a cop kills someone unjustly, there need to be charges or convictions. As a young black male, I'm 21 times more likely to be shot and killed by a police officer than a white male. What's the deal? Let me kick it into perspective with you guys and keep it real. We can't define the problem anymore as black versus white. This is a simple distinction right in front of us of wrong from right. This is a system of oppression against blacks, people of color, and poor whites. In 2014, 1,039 people were killed by police, to just the 11 officers who died in the line of duty. Based off of the 11-to-1 ratio, ask yourself the question, who's doing the mass killing, civilians or the police? I'm not anti-police, I'm pro-accountability. As a police officer is a human being just like me. Their public position shouldn't grant them immunity. They must be tried equally. We must unify as a nation and make things right. I'm quite frankly tired of things being this way. And in the words of Eric Garner, this unfair treatment, this oppression, it must stop today. At its finest, this is it. Look at the cases of Ayanna Jones, Tamir Rice, Akai Gurley, John Crawford, Eleanor Bumpers, Amadou Diallo, Sean Bell, Oscar Grant, and many others. What do they depict? Oppression. Thank you.
I may be one of the few people in here who interacted with Malcolm X when he was alive. But I first met him in 1959. I was about 18 years old. I'm 74 now.
Looking good.
I met this beautiful man in the state of Virginia where I was growing up, not New York City. And I had heard about him, and I liked what I heard when I got a chance to hear him. I heard he was coming to Richmond, Virginia. I went to hear him and was very impressed, and of course I became a follower in the Nation of Islam for a number of years. As a matter of fact, I was at the meeting that got Malcolm suspended from the Nation, where he made the famous chicken come home to roost statement. So, you know, it's a long history there, but I remember the last conversation I had with Malcolm on the personal note. But at the Muslim Bazaar in the 169th Armory, some of y'all probably been there. When he was coming down the aisle, and I spoke to him as usual. And I remember I was complaining about some of the sorry black politicians we had. He smiled and said, brother, don't look at the puppet, look at the puppeteer. You got to understand who's controlling these liberals. But I remember that night, Arthur Davis, Ruby Dee, the great jazz drummer, Max Gross was there. Alan Tunde, the African drummer, some of y'all might remember, who literally pioneered African dance and culture in this country. I just did it as a background, just proud to having met Malcolm, and I like to think, especially the young people on the panel today, everyone on the panel. And when the young man mentioned the fact that you have so many black people in Latin America, Malcolm was always conscious of that. Most of us do not know that you got 2 or 3 times as many black people in South America as North America. Most slaves who left Africa went to South America and the Caribbean. So we have to keep all of that in mind. But Malcolm was very international. As far back as the early stages of the Vietnam War, Malcolm was denouncing this. Right. It took Dr. King a while to get there. Malcolm forced a lot of the more moderate black leaders to start taking more militant stands, including Dr. King. He was backing up on it, but you know, thanks to pressure from Malcolm, the young people in organizations like SNCC, Snook Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, Cleveland Sellers, other elevators, some of y'all remember these people, they were listening more to Malcolm. They started putting pressure on King. Some of y'all know the story. He started taking a more bold stand and denouncing the Vietnam War, which might have cost him his life. Right. But the point is that we all, you know, learn from Malcolm, and I was proud to have met him, proud to have interact with him when he was alive. And we were in Harlem every day in front of the Harlem State Office building with my brother Larry Holmes and I and others. I was talking about Larry making the 2 hours. Right across the street at the Teresa Hotel, I was around when Malcolm made the park before Fidel Castro and his entourage from Cuba to come uptown because they were giving them a rough time in the downtown hotels. Malcolm was one of the ones who interceded. That's right. That's right. Along with another brother, many of you knew, Alumbe Bragg. I first met Alumbe Bragg around the same time in the early 1960s when I started coming to New York. My family moved up here. The point is that there was so much going on there. Malcolm was a part of the whole international movement at that time, and he was taking stands up. You could say he was way ahead of his time. He was one of the few black leaders who was not afraid to talk about imperialism, colonialism, the whole 9 yards. But most black leaders just stuck to civil rights. Malcolm dealt with serious international issues at that time. So we have to appreciate him in that context. He was a pioneer. Outside the black nationalist leaders in Harlem, hardly anybody was dealing with international issues or the struggles of Africa for independence. Many of the Asian nations that was coming up out of colonialism, you know, China, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, so many of them were also colonies. The Philippines. So I'm just saying, Malcolm understood the world in the whole international context. Most of us were too afraid to even deal with it, even if we did. And one of the most influential newspapers at that time was Muhammad Speech. Some of y'all from my generation may remember. But most people don't know that Malcolm was the founder of that newspaper. It didn't start in Chicago. It started being published in New York. It's giving me a lot of history, and then eventually went to Chicago. But I don't want to say too much. I know other people have things to say, but I just wanted to share some of those experiences with you. And you never know what history will bring, and time flies. It doesn't seem like it was 50 years ago. It seems like it was just yesterday. And I just remember sitting in the audience at Manhattan Center. That building is not too far from here, right up the street from the present-day Madison Square Garden, where Malcolm made his last speech as the number of the Nation of Islam. The next morning I found out that he had been, had been suspended. By the time he was assassinated, I had moved on to California. It was one of the saddest days of my life when I got that news. But the struggle continues. Thank you.